Have you ever felt like your entire life was a race you never consciously signed up for? A race where someone is always ahead of you, earning more, achieving more, living what looks like a better life. And no matter how far you go, there's always someone further. What happened when you finally stopped running? This is a story about that moment, about what changes when you stop competing with everyone and start listening to yourself. There was a man named Ethan Cole. Ethan lived in Seattle, Washington, a city filled with ambition, innovation, and quiet pressure. On the surface, his life looked exactly like what many people strive for. He worked as a product manager at a fast-growing tech company. His salary was solid. His apartment overlooked the skyline. His weekends were filled with brunches, networking events, and the occasional weekend trip out of town. If you asked anyone who knew him, they would say he was doing well. But if you asked Ethan, and he answered honestly, he would say he was tired. Not physically tired, but mentally exhausted in a way he couldn't quite explain. Every morning, the first thing he did wasn't stretch or breathe or enjoy the quiet. It was check his phone, emails, messages, notifications, and then LinkedIn. Someone had just gotten promoted. Someone else had launched a startup. Another person had just bought a house. Ethan would scroll and scroll and scroll. And each post felt like a quiet reminder. You're behind. He didn't hear it out loud, but he felt it every single day. At work, he pushed himself harder than anyone expected. He volunteered for extra projects, stayed late, answered emails at midnight, not because he loved what he was doing, but because he didn't want to fall behind. Because somewhere deep down, he believed that success was something you had to chase, faster than everyone else. And if you slowed down, even for a moment, you would lose. Over time, something subtle began to happen. The things he once enjoyed and started to feel like obligations. Even his achievements felt temporary. A promotion would feel good for a few days. Then it would fade. And in its place, a new comparison would appear. A new person doing better. A new reason to feel like he wasn't enough. One evening, after a long day at work, Ethan found himself sitting alone in his apartment. His laptop was still open. His phone was still in his hand. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't doing anything. He just sat there, quiet. And a strange thought crossed his mind. What am I actually chasing? He didn't have an answer, and that bothered him more than anything. The next morning, instead of opening LinkedIn, he hesitated, just for a moment. Then, almost without thinking, he put his phone down. That small decision didn't feel important at the time, but it was the beginning of something. A few days later, Ethan took a walk after work. No headphones, no music, no distractions, just the sound of his own footsteps and the city around him. He ended up at a small park he had passed countless times, but never really noticed. There, sitting on a bench, was an older man, feeding birds. Ethan sat down nearby, not intending to talk, but after a few minutes, the man glanced over and smiled. "You look like you're thinking too much," he said gently. Ethan let out a quiet laugh. "That obvious?" The man nodded. "People who are at peace don't carry that kind of tension in their shoulders." Something about the way he said it made Ethan pause. "I just feel like I'm always behind," Ethan admitted. The man tilted his head slightly. "Behind who?" Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He realized he didn't have a clear answer. "Everyone, I guess," he said finally. The man smiled again, but this time there was something deeper in it. "That sounds exhausting." They sat in silence for a moment. Then the man spoke again. "You know, I used to live like that too." Ethan looked at him, surprised. "I spent most of my life comparing," the man continued. always measuring myself against others, always trying to keep up. "What happened?" Ethan asked. The man tossed a few crumbs to the birds, watching them gather. "One day I realized something simple," he said. "No matter how fast you run, there will always be someone faster." Ethan nodded slowly. He already knew that feeling. "But here's the part most people miss," the man added. "You don't actually need to win that race." Ethan frowned slightly. "If you're not trying to be better than others, what are you supposed to do?" The man turned to him. "Be better than who you were yesterday," he said. "And more importantly, be honest about what you actually want." That sentence stayed with Ethan. Not because it was complicated, but because it was so simple, and yet he had never truly considered it. That night, Ethan went home and sat in the same place as before, laptop open, phone in hand. But this time, he didn't scroll. Instead, he asked himself a different question. What do I actually want if no one is watching? The answer didn't come immediately, but slowly, pieces began to surface. He didn't care about titles as much as he thought. He didn't need to impress people he barely knew. He missed having time to think, to read, to feel present. He missed doing things, not because they looked good, but because they felt right. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began to make small changes. He stopped checking social media first thing in the morning. He left work on time, even when others stayed late. He said no to projects that didn't align with what he wanted to learn. At first, it felt uncomfortable, like he was falling behind, like he was giving up something important. But then, something unexpected happened. The noise started to fade. The constant pressure, the invisible race, the endless comparisons. They became quieter. And in that quiet, Ethan began to notice something he hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. He started to focus on his own path, not the fastest path, not the most impressive one, but the one that felt real. He picked up old hobbies he had abandoned, reading in the evening, writing thoughts in a notebook, taking long walks without a destination, and for the first time in years, he felt present in his own life. Months passed. From the outside, Ethan's life didn't look dramatically different. He still worked at the same company, still lived in the same apartment, but internally, everything had changed. He no longer measured his worth by someone else's progress. He no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. And interestingly, his work improved, not because he was trying to compete, but because he was focused, calm, intentional. One afternoon during a team meeting, his manager pulled him aside. "You've been doing great work lately," she said. "You seem more grounded." Ethan smiled. He didn't explain. Because some changes are hard to put into words. They're not about what you achieve. They're about how you feel while you're living. One evening, he returned to the same park, the same bench, but the older man wasn't there. Instead, Ethan sat alone, watching the birds gather in the fading light, and he realized something. For most of his life, he had been running a race that had no finish line, competing with people who weren't even aware of his existence, chasing a version of success that kept moving further away, the closer he got. And the moment he stepped out of that race was the moment he finally felt free. So what happens when you stop competing with everyone? You stop measuring your life by someone else's timeline. You stop chasing things that don't truly matter to you. You start making decisions based on alignment, not comparison. And slowly, you begin to build a life that feels like your own, not louder, not faster, but deeper, more honest, more peaceful. Because the truth is, the world will always give you someone to compare yourself to. There will always be someone younger, richer, more successful, more accomplished. If you tie your sense of worth to that comparison, you will never feel like you're enough. But if you choose to step away, if you decide that your life is not a competition, you create space, space to think, space to breathe, space to understand what truly matters to you. And in that space, you may find something far more valuable than winning. You may find peace, so if you've been feeling like you're always behind, maybe it's not because you're not moving fast enough. Maybe it's because you're running a race that was never meant for you, and maybe it's time to stop. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what you're really chasing and why. Don't forget to like, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more life lessons like this. Thank you for being here, and I wish you a life that feels truly your own.